This Organized Chaos video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. Let's see, what was the Midnight's Edge one? Why Disney failed with Star Wars but succeeded with Marvel and Pixar. Do you mean how badly Marvel and Star Wars have been damaged by Disney? Because the other ones might be kind of old and not super relevant. Let's see. Oh, it's an old video? This could be interesting. 3 years ago. It could be interesting to see the landscape back then. I'm wondering, I think 3 years ago Midnight's Edge was still kind of crazy, but they might have been kind of sane at this, because when they first came out, I want to say they came out in 2015, and they were okay when they first came out. It felt like lots of insider information, like analyzing stuff, and that's not what they do anymore. Although they do frame it that way.
Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker will end the Skywalker saga and leave Disney to explore other aspects of the Star Wars universe. But will there be any fans left who will want to explore the Star Wars universe with them by that point? Or will the damage inflicted upon the brand by the sequel trilogy be too great to overcome? Unlike Disney's earlier and arguably more successful acquisitions, Pixar and Marvel, the Lucasfilm acquisition hasn't worked out nearly as well as anyone involved had envisioned or hoped. However, with the benefit of hindsight, we can pinpoint where things went wrong and why
hasn't turned out. Those movies made bank. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Yeah, sure, there's fan reaction, which is mixed to bad, but like those movies made bank, which is what Disney's looking at. So what metric are you talking about how not being successful?
Lucasfilm failed under Disney ownership, while both Marvel and Pixar thrived. The reason we bring them up is because in some sense, the Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm acquisitions are all related. In this video, we will go through them all, and in the process, explore why.
Okay, I'd like to explore, I guess they're all related in that they're all acquisitions that happened around the same time frame. But how are they related outside of that?
The Lucasfilm acquisition alone arguably failed, and if there is any path forward. If you like the content provided in this video, then please help share it, leave a like, leave a comment, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe, and make sure you click the bell icon to indicate you want notifications every time a new video is uploaded. Much of the information that is about to be relayed comes straight from Bob Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company. The book is often mislabeled as his memoirs, but this is not an accurate description. The book is, if anything, a management book detailing how to be successful in business, progress in your career, and manage corporations. Each of his management principles is illustrated by case studies, and here, some new information is revealed to the public. When Iger was appointed the new CEO of the Walt Disney Company in 2005, he had 3 specific priorities for Disney: to create branded content, to embrace the changes brought on by technology, and to become a truly global corporation. To further the first of those priorities, to create more branded content, Iger in part sought to acquire other companies and add them to the Disney portfolio. There were 3 in particular he had his sights set on. First, and most importantly, there was Pixar. He also wanted Marvel and Lucasfilm down the line, but Pixar was the most pressing, and it would turn out to be instrumental in acquiring Lucasfilm later on. As of 2005, Disney's own animation department was in shambles. The only successful animated movies
I sped up the video just to have it go by a bit faster. Just FYI, it's the only reason I did it.
Coming out of Disney at this time were the Pixar movies. However, Pixar was an independent production company that merely had a distribution deal and co-funding deal with Disney, and that deal was about to expire. Worse yet, the relationship between the outgoing Disney CEO Michael Eisner and then Pixar CEO Steve Jobs had deteriorated to the point where it manifested itself in open hostility between the two companies, and once the deal was up, Pixar was going elsewhere. Iger knew that would be extremely detrimental to Disney, so when he started his tenure as CEO, he immediately set about to mend fences with Steve Jobs and Pixar. It took effort, but he was more than successful in this endeavor. In addition to mending the business relationship, Iger and Jobs developed a mutual respect and personal friendship, which in turn fostered a deepening business relationship between Disney and Pixar. First, the deal was extended. Then, after convincing both their respective shareholders it was the right move, Disney bought Pixar for $7.4 billion in an all-stock deal. One of the conditions of the deal was that Pixar would be allowed to remain Pixar and retain the unique culture that made them a creative powerhouse in the first place. But in addition to running Pixar, John Lasseter would also run and revive Disney Animation. The Pixar acquisition was a roaring success both for Pixar and for Disney, and time would go on to prove there had been no losing parties in that transaction. Everybody won, and everybody came out on top. Because of this, the Disney board were much more open to approving future Disney acquisitions as well.
Whitney, basically what Disney wants, eyeballs for the product, so they want the biggest sandbox where everyone is included. Absolutely. Yes. That is, you're nailing it. That is what Disney wants.
The next major acquisition was Marvel. Marvel had actually been on Disney's radar since before Iger was appointed CEO. Internal discussions about the pros and cons of a Marvel acquisition had been entertained as early as during Eisner's tenure as CEO. At that time, it had been decided that Marvel was too edgy and not consistent with the Disney brand, so nothing more had come of it. Iger, however, disagreed with the earlier assessments and decided to pursue Marvel. He was eventually able to track down Marvel's reclusive owner, Ike Perlmutter, and reassurance that Marvel would remain Marvel the same way Pixar was allowed to remain
N2 1986? N2B 1986. 2D animation. I think it was John Lasseter who said when Pixar was purchased that if Disney has Pixar, they should let Pixar do the computer animated stuff because that's their brand. And then Disney should do the hand-drawn stuff. And Disney said no. But yeah, I would like to see a return of hand-drawn animation.
Unchanged after their acquisition, Perlmutter agreed to sell. On August 31st, 2009, Disney announced that they would buy Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion in a part cash, part shares acquisition. The announcement shook the world, as no hint that a deal was even in the works leaked in advance. Many felt that Disney overpaid, as Marvel didn't have the movie rights to its most famous characters. It did, however, have a prior distribution deal with Paramount, which Disney would also have to buy them out of. It should be noted that at this time, the MCU was still in its infancy, as only Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk had been released. Over the course of the next few years, as the MCU grew to be the biggest brand in entertainment history, it would become clear that Disney had, if anything, gotten a bargain.
Is this actually going to be a good video? Because this is kind of interesting. I mean, it's basic stuff, but okay. We haven't gotten to cringe yet.
With both Pixar and Marvel now under Disney's umbrella, Iger set his sights on Lucasfilm. Bob Iger and George Lucas knew each other from before, which held matters. Back in the early 1990s, Bob Iger had been the president of ABC Television, and in that capacity, he had both greenlit and remained extremely supportive of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, even when ratings had started to dwindle, something which George Lucas had appreciated a great deal. Over a lunch appointment in May of 2011, Iger very gently and very sensitively provided Lucas with some tacit reminders of what he already knew all too well. He wasn't getting any younger, he wasn't getting any fitter, and he had no plan of succession for Lucasfilm. While Lucas had children who would inherit his assets, he had no heir that could or would take over the actual running of Lucasfilm's day-to-day operations. So who would look after and maintain his life's work when he was no longer there to do the job himself? Iger didn't press the point any further and gave Lucas time to contemplate the matter. Meanwhile, Steve Jobs pointed out to Lucas that under Iger, Disney had done right by Pixar, and that probably helped sway Lucas in his decision to ultimately sell to Disney. Lucas knew Steve Jobs from before as well, as Pixar had started out as an offshoot of the Lucasfilm computer division back in 1979, before Steve Jobs bought it from him. A few months later, Lucas reached out to Iger and let him know he was willing to sell Lucasfilm and all of its associated assets. But he wanted the Pixar deal for it, meaning $7.4 billion. That was going to be a problem. When Disney bought Pixar for $7.4 billion, that included a big group of world-class engineers, seasoned directors, artists and writers, and a real production infrastructure.
Yeah, throughout the comic book run, Marvel was always the edgier one, while DC was more the safe. They could do edgy stuff too, but it was more the safer, maybe more Disney brand family stuff. Marvel usually went for a bit more of an edge, typically in the comic books. It's been different in the movies, even though I think there's totally kind of an edge to the MCU. Like the DC stuff going for the dark and gritty DCEU. I think it's interesting how it flopped. It went right back. Well, I guess it flopped in box office, more or less. We'll have to see. DCEU might fix up.
Structure. Included with the package were the 6 movies that were at the time already in various stages of development, the first of which would be released the same year and the subsequent ones annually after that, all of which were virtually guaranteed to be smash hits by the Pixar brand name alone. This was all factored into the $7.4 billion price tag. Likewise with Marvel that they only paid $4 billion for. There came included a creative team, a production infrastructure, and there were at the time 3 movies in production, the first of which would be released the next year and followed by 2 movies the year after that, and down the line, possibly 3 movies a year in accordance with the company's MCU roadmap. This was all factored into that $4 billion price tag. Nothing like this was the case with Lucasfilm. While the technical divisions and animation department were busy, the movie division was, for all intents and purposes, dormant. There was nothing in the works for either Star Wars or Indiana Jones, nor was there a production pipeline. There were plenty of talented technical personnel. However, there were no creative teams that could get the ball rolling on anything, even with an infusion of cash. There was literally nothing outside of the Star Wars and Indiana Jones licenses themselves. While Pixar and Marvel were already fully functional production entities with their own unique company cultures and distinct creative drives, for Lucasfilm, Disney would have to begin anew and set up everything, the entire production pipeline, from scratch. In retrospect, this could now be seen as a red flag, as it also meant there was no established and successful operation in place. However, at the time, all it meant was that a movie was 3 years away from release. Without any movies in development and no creative team in place, the Disney bean counters arrived at the conclusion that Lucasfilm with all its assets was only worth in the vicinity of $3.6 to $3.75 billion. This was the genuine estimated market value made by the same financial experts that had previously signed off on $7.4 billion for Pixar and $4 billion for Marvel. Maybe one day the value of Lucasfilm could be increased to Pixar levels, but for what they got and what was left to do to get a new batch of Star Wars movies off the ground, the conclusion of the number crunchers was that $3.75 billion was the absolute ceiling for what they realistically could assign to Lucasfilm. Lucas understood the reasoning behind why Lucasfilm wasn't worth as much as Pixar, but less than Marvel? That would be adding insult to injury. He wanted, at the very least, the Marvel deal. In order to play ball and close the deal, Disney increased their offer for Lucasfilm to $4.05 billion. This was an acceptable increase from what Disney had shelled out for Marvel, so Lucas agreed. The deal was announced on October 30th of 2012. From Disney's point of view, however, this meant that they overpaid to the tune of nearly $500 million. This in turn only put increased...
Yeah, so far this video's fine. This is 3 years old though too, so they might not have gone full Phantom Menace yet. Just they were definitely hedging the Phantom Menace stuff because they were pretty heavy in the Ghostbusters 2016 stuff. But yeah,
pressure on Star Wars to work for them. As part of the deal, Lucas had to be available to consult, but he also had to understand that Disney were now the ones that ultimately called the shots. Relinquishing that control was hard for Lucas, since he had ruled Star Wars single-handedly for so long. This may have been the reason that in June of 2012, while the acquisition was in the works but not yet a done deal, George Lucas appointed Kathleen Kennedy to succeed him as Lucasfilm chairman. This way, Kennedy would be included with the acquisition and continue to serve as Lucasfilm chairman even under Disney ownership. Although this has never been stated as the reason why, Lucas's intention behind installing a new chairman of his own choosing right before Disney could appoint their own was quite possibly to ensure that there would be someone high up at Lucasfilm to protect his vision and side with him if there ever was a disagreement between him and Disney over the direction of Star Wars. On paper, this seemed like a good idea. The fatal mistake was choosing Kathleen Kennedy, who, as it would turn out...
Oh, now we're gonna bash Kathleen Kennedy, aren't we? Okay. We brought this up, when did I bring this up? Was it on my live stream or maybe it was on Dane's? I don't remember. But Kathleen Kennedy is a fucking legend. She is a legend in the film industry. Look up her filmography. She is a legend. So, like, this Kathleen Kennedy bashing gets so goddamn obnoxious.
Would be anything but loyal to him and his vision.
Why is it important that Kathleen Kennedy be loyal to him? Why? He appointed her head as a head of Lucasfilm. I assume that's to be the person who just manages Lucasfilm the best way forward. Why would loyalty be involved?
At first glance, Kathleen Kennedy appears to be a terrific producer. For more than 3 decades, she's produced countless films which are considered classics, masterpieces, or both. She has served on a number of advisory boards, and she has been awarded a Grammy Award in recognition of her outstanding support of student filmmaking, a Women in Film Crystal Award.
Yeah, there is a rumor that she's stepping out next year. I think she might just be leaving. The Juice Maiden. Yeah, there is that rumor, and it's actually coming from fairly reliable sources this time. So I think she's leaving on her own volition, and I'm sure these Phantom Menace guys will be saying victory, even though they've been talking about her leaving for like 5 years.
And most recently, she was appointed Honorary Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to film production in the United Kingdom. Upon closer examination, however, virtually all of this can be attributed to her extensive working relationship with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Both.
Oh, you know what? She's not actually a legend. It's because of the men she worked with, right? Right? You know, she had to be smart enough to know to work with these guys. You know that, right? She's a damn good producer. Jesus.
Both of whom are among the greatest filmmakers of all time. All of the great movies she worked on were either written by Lucas, directed by Spielberg, or both. To which extent...
Yes, she's not a writer or a director. She's a producer. God damn, dude.
And her input as a producer made Spielberg's movies better is unknown. Spielberg initially hired her as an assistant, but apparently she was a terrible typist who was only kept on due to her good production ideas. Although the movie where she had the most
good production ideas, there you go.
Input prior to becoming chairman of Lucasfilm was Jurassic Park 3, the film which ended the Jurassic Park franchise.
You know, he's talking about Lucas didn't have a high opinion of her because, you know, she just, she was terrible typist, but, you know, she had good production ideas. Lucas gave her Lucasfilms to run under Disney. That's what you just said. So obviously Lucas had a high opinion of her for pretty much their whole time working together, for the most part, it sounds like.
Guys, for a decade and a half, up until the reboot by Colin Trevorrow. There was nothing in her resume to indicate that she was ready to run a studio, nor that she had the slightest affection for the...
Yet George Lucas, the guy you guys seem to love, seemed to think she was up for it. He picked her as the person to succeed her. Or him. I mean, my God. I hate the Kathleen Kennedy bashing. She seems to be running Star Wars fine. Listen, man, it's not all hits from Disney. But, we got some good stuff. I mean, we're going to be talking about Andor tomorrow on the podcast. Andor is fucking fantastic, guys. Not everything under Disney Star Wars has been good, but I do think we have more hits than misses.
The Star Wars brand. If Lucas had indeed hired her to protect his interests and his vision for Star Wars under Disney's ownership, his hopes were dashed early on. Lucas wrote an outline for a sequel trilogy, which we've previously covered here at Midnight's Edge. To briefly recap, Iger bought this outline, but made it clear that it was up to Disney whether or not they would follow it, and if they did, to which extent. Upon reading it, Iger came to be of the opinion that Lucas's vision wasn't the direction he felt was the right one. This is where Kathleen Kennedy had the opportunity to stand up for Lucas's vision and his sequel trilogy treatment. Lucas...
Okay. In case you guys are wondering, Lucas had this outline before he sold it to Disney. If Lucas wanted to, he could have put it in the contract. You guys definitely have to do this movie. You have to follow this outline for the movies. He could have put that in that contract. He absolutely could have. But he didn't. He left it open for them. And they chose this path instead. Listen, man, the sequel trilogy, in particular Rise of Skywalker, not happy with it. And honestly, I like the first two entries, but since it ends with Rise of Skywalker, it brings the whole thing down. That being said, if Lucas was dedicated to his sequel trilogy, he would have made Disney follow it. He didn't. Odds are he might have just had a faintest outline and not anything strong. We don't know the full extent of what he had. They did their own thing, for better or worse. And let's face it, George Lucas was fully in charge of the prequel trilogy, and lots of people like to forget there's lots of prequel hate. There's still prequel hate now. I think it's a bit overdone. I definitely have my issues with the prequels, though.
Lucas himself no doubt hoped that she would, as that may have been the reason why he hired her in the first place. She didn't. Instead, she sided with Iger, alongside director J.J. Abrams.
Yes, because she's allowed to have her own independent opinions. Lucas put her in charge. He didn't put her in charge to be like a shadow puppet doing his will at Disney. He put her in charge to carry on the company.
Abrams, they came up with a new vision for the sequel trilogy, which Kennedy ensured would come with a hefty side order of intersectional political...
Jesus Christ. This video goes from, this is kind of, okay, to fucking off the goddamn rails. Holy shit.
Ideology. Upon its release, George Lucas was immensely disappointed with The Force Awakens.
Okay, okay, I would need a source for that one, but let's see. He said something about identity politics or something, which is always such a...
Didn't. Instead, she sided with Iger. Alongside director J.J. Abrams, they came up with a new vision for the sequel trilogy, which Kennedy ensured would come with a hefty side order of intersectional political ideology. Upon its
intersectional political ideology, oh my god, people treated equally, fuck! This is gonna suck! These people are ridiculous. Oh my god.
At least, George Lucas was immensely disappointed with The Force Awakens, because...
I would like to see a source that says George Lucas was really disappointed with The Force Awakens, because every time I see people say this, and then I'll see here's a video clip of George Lucas bashing the sequel trilogy, and then you click on the video clip, and it has nothing to fucking do with it. So seriously, give me a source, an interview, a video clip, something of George Lucas saying, hey, the sequel trilogy sucks.
It didn't bring anything new to the table. For the second part of the trilogy, The Last Jedi, Kathleen Kennedy hired Rian Johnson, who, by all accounts, would proceed to...
We're getting to The Last Jedi! Yay! Fandom menace! Yay!
deviate from the sequel trilogy outline Abrams, Kennedy, and Iger originally had agreed upon. To which extent he deviated is known to only those involved. Abrams himself stated that Johnson didn't really derail his original sequel trilogy plans, although admitting else would have been a PR nightmare. The Last Jedi marks the spot where all the success indicators started pointing downwards for Star Wars. Its huge box office opening was followed by a sharp drop-off in the subsequent weeks. This is where a large...
Well, big movies usually have a drop-off in subsequent weeks. I'm kind of interested what its second weekend drop was. Let me look into that. Let's see, can we see a week by week? 220 domestic opening. So second week was 67.5%. For a big budget movie, that's usually typical. That's not... Oh! And it went up the third weekend. Well, it's Christmas. It went up third weekend. And then, yeah, and then down, then up. Down, down, up. Goes back and forth. It's... Yeah, no, I know it's Christmas weekend, but I think it's interesting. It started, it's decline and then it shot back up. It sounds like lots of people are just planning to watch it around Christmas. Yeah.
Section of the hardcore fans turned on the franchise, and in its aftermath, toy sales, the Han Solo feature film, and the Galaxy's Edge attraction at Disney resorts all tanked. Right now, it is up to JJ.
They all tanked. Yes, that's it. It wasn't overproliferation. It was The Last Jedi. Last Jedi killed Star Wars, guys. You know, that movie that was massively successful, that had a better third weekend than its second weekend, that killed Star Wars.
J. Abrams to salvage this iteration of Star Wars, the legacy of which will be influenced by how well he manages to stick...
Yeah, to Juice Main, I like the first two, but Rise was a mess. I think Last Jedi... Yeah, no, I love The Last Jedi. It's pretty good. I think Force Awakens plays like a remake of A New Hope, but I think for what they're going for, they wanted to like cleanse out the feeling of the prequels, so they kind of wanted to redo a soft reboot of Star Wars, and I think for that purpose it worked out fine. But then Rise of Skywalker, just the conclusion of both those, just kind of it just doesn't fit. Rise of Skywalker is like one of the worst examples of screenwriting ever. Instead of trying to make a good movie, they're trying to make a movie that pleases the Star Wars haters and the Star Wars fans. They're trying to please the people who hated and liked The Last Jedi. And you can't do both. You just gotta make a good movie and see where it lands.
The landing with The Rise of Skywalker. What separated the Lucasfilm acquisition from the Pixar and Marvel acquisitions was that with Lucasfilm, there came no production pipeline and creative powers with the projects waiting to be realized. Instead, there came the last-minute addition of Kathleen Kennedy, who was given a large role in forming all of this, a role for which she wasn't the right person. In his book...
Okay, who was the right person then?
There are many executives Iger worked with across the years that receive a ton of praise. About Kathleen Kennedy, he merely says that she came along with the Lucasfilm package, and that's about it. When her contract was renewed, Disney...
Which tells me nothing. I mean, sometimes in books like that, you can get kind of an idea of what they mean. But, like, the fact that you can't even give me something like that tells me you have nothing. Because, okay, so, Genesis fan. I've read the Phil Collins autobiography, and he talks about how he was really good friends. He met two of his music icons, two people he just loved as musicians, and he became really good friends with them. And it was Robert Plant and Eric Clapton. He's like, Robert Plant and Eric Clapton, I met him, we became really good friends, it was like a dream. And to this day, I'm still a very good friend with Robert. And then he just doesn't say anything about Eric Clapton. That actually tells you a lot. This quote about Kathleen Kennedy doesn't even have that much.
Disney did not announce it, or otherwise show any kind of public support to their chairman, who was by then under fire. Instead, Kennedy's camp had to leak her renewal to the entertainment media, as if it were an inside scoop of production trouble. Kennedy can't be fired on account of being too high-profile a female executive over a franchise that has made...
She can't be fired because we can't be shown as firing a woman. Or because she's a fucking legend and Star Wars is doing all right.
Social justice, its domain. However, she's been sidelined and is unlikely to be extended.
I like how this is all just to, like, reduce Kathleen Kennedy's role in just, like, filmmaking. Oh, you know, she worked on a lot of high-profile movies, but she didn't write and direct them. And, oh, yeah, no, she's been behind Star Wars the whole time, and it's made a whole bunch of money. But that's not because of her. It's like, whatever, man.
Beyond her current contract. For better or worse, the Skywalker saga is done. How audiences will respond to the final chapter of the sequel trilogy remains, but it will be...
Whitney Moorhauser. A good movie doesn't need to be made by a committee because they play it safe and has no vision. Usually this is true. An interesting counterpoint to that would be if you watch a lot of Tom Baker Doctor Who. That was... If you look at the writer's room for that was very much stuff made by committee, but a lot of it works really well. It's like really low-budget sci-fi, but they figure out how to make the low budget work well. It's not all perfect, but like a lot of it's really good. Committee stuff, 9 times out of 10 you are correct. Absolutely. But there are exceptions to that rule. It's just not common.
Be followed by a new chapter in the Star Wars saga regardless, and by many accounts, Marvel guru Kevin Feige.
The Juice Main. I think the problem was they didn't have a coherent vision trilogy, and the third was fan service patchwork. Yes and no. They actually did have a plan. So, J.J. Abrams had a plan for the whole trilogy. If you're a channel regular, you know this, but I'm going to repeat it because I think I have a bit more people in the chat than usual. So, J.J. Abrams wrote out an outline for episodes 8 and 9 to follow up Force Awakens. Rian Johnson didn't like that, and he did his own thing for episode 8, but he worked with Colin Trevorrow, who at that time was in charge of episode 9. Colin Trevorrow said, cool. So, Rian Johnson decided to carry on in his own way with episode 8, and Colin Trevorrow followed up with Rian Johnson's script with episode 9. However, Colin Trevorrow was then fired. And then J.J. Abrams was brought back on, and J.J. Abrams looked at Colin Trevorrow's script, said, I didn't want to do that, and tried to reboot his original vision for the series, except with Rian Johnson's movie now in the middle. So it was a bad idea. There's no telling if Colin Trevorrow's movie would have been better. Colin Trevorrow is not as good a director as J.J. Abrams, in my opinion. His script had good ideas. Like, one of the ideas of his script was Rey has her new lightsaber. Luke, as a Force Ghost, is training Rey. Luke, as a Force Ghost, is also trolling Kylo Ren. There's no return of Palpatine. Kylo Ren is the main villain in that movie. It's tough to tell if that would have been better, because there's no telling. But I like the story ideas involved with this. You can look it up. I believe that I don't know if it's the whole script or just elements of the script are actually leaked, but it's called Star Wars Episode 9: Duel of the Fates, if you want to look it up.
Will have a big role in shaping it. But will he be able to create excitement over another story set in the Star Wars universe? Or now, is it just too late? Was there something Disney could have done earlier, and if so, what?
Jesus Christ, that video was kind of funny. It just went straight off the goddamn rails. It was going so well, and then here, off the rails we go. Boom.
They think order and chaos are somehow opposites and try to control what won't.
Do you enjoy pain?
Pain don't hurt.